Hey everyone, and welcome to part 6 of my series on how to tune cars in BeamNG.drive as my phone goes off. In this part, we are doing a Baja vehicle. I suggest either using the Autobello Piccolina, the Ibishu Hopper, the D series, or I think it's the Sand Basher, or the Dune Hopper and the Rock Basher, I think they're called. Stop going on. So yeah, the Piccolina, the D series, and then the Dune Kicker and Rock Basher. These two are technically already Baja vehicles, especially this. This is a trophy truck. This is a Rock Racer or Rock Bouncer. And then the Piccolina has I think it's a Class 5 variant. This has like a trophy truck style, pre-runner style setup, and then the Hopper crawler stuff type works as Baja as well. So, as usual, pick your vehicle. Technically anything works. I have a FCV that is set up for Baja. I'll show that really quick. But yeah, anything works as long as you have a lot of suspension travel. These two are meant for Baja. So, as usual, let's start off with the parts. Excuse me. I recommend a straight axle in the rear and independent front. I do not recommend a straight axle in the front at all for this. Excuse me. Because it just doesn't handle as well. So, let's get through this part. Okay, now that we have all the parts, something I should have mentioned in the rock crawling video is a Stinger front bumper is designed to help push the vehicle over obstacles and help you not flip over forwards. I'll kind of edit that into the crawling one, I hope, if I remember. Either way, now that we have all the parts, we're not looking for a total top speed. What matters most with this is suspension. So, as I always do, let's head over to the road and test out the brakes. We want to not have ABS because we are off-road, and typically on dirt and stuff you do not want ABS. I will take this time to mention, keep an eye on how your suspension moves, and you should also have the pitch and roll apps, the tire debug, the wheel debug, the Geforce meter, and then the engine debug. I will explain why when we get to it. Depending on whatever vehicle you chose, you might only have the normal off-road coilovers, or you might have these coilovers and separate bypass shocks. For the most part, the tuning will be the same when I get to the coilovers, and if you don't have bypass shocks, don't worry about it, just adjust your coilovers accordingly, or whatever you have, adjust them accordingly. But this is specifically for vehicles with both. And yeah, so as usual, I like to have it so that my brakes lock up under full braking, so like 95-ish%, and not too early. So let's see when these lock up, if they do. Okay, I'm actually going to leave the brakes where they are. If you would like to see how I typically tune my brakes, check out my either street car tuning, track, drift, whichever one of the other ones that are on the street or rally. For this one, I'm going to leave it how it is. I would like to give it a bit more, a lower gearing. So let's go to 415, or higher gearing, I guess. And then I'm going to up the rev limit. After brakes, I typically do the engine. Oops, I forgot to lower the cut time. Doesn't really matter for this. So once you're done with the brakes, like I said, if you need to, check out one of my other videos for that. But typically you want the front wheels to lock up just before the back ones. So use your brake bias for that. To the right is the front brakes, to the left is to the rear. And then lower the brake multiplier so that they lock up at basically full pedal or full trigger, but not like halfway through the trigger or your pedal. That way you have more control over it rather than them not locking up at all or then just locking instantly. Now, for the engine, as I mentioned, I immediately go all the way to the top RPM as I can, and then I go down to the engine debug, slowly raise my RPM, and if it gives me a rev warning, I set my rev limiter to where the rev warning is. Since I chose a stage 3 block, it's not, so we're good with that. If I chose like a heavy duty block, it would probably be more like 5800 RPM, so like I said, if you have to, wherever it shows the rev warning, set your RPM limit just below that. Your RPM cut time is pretty much wherever you want it to be. What should we do next? Maybe alignment, which we can't do with this truck. I forgot about that. Certain vehicles like this you cannot change the alignment on. Tire pressure I'm going to leave at 30 psi. Tire ballast, I don't really like using tire ballast for my Baja vehicles. What that does is add weight. It adds weight to your wheels. Helps you keep your center of gravity lower, and so on. Actually, let's add... no, I'm just going to leave it how it is. Like I said, I don't really like it. And then I am going to widen... I was going to offset the rear wheels, but I'll leave them the same. Wider stance or more offset will be more stable, but yeah, I can widen it a little bit. Like I just mentioned, the wider your wheel offset, the more stable it can be, the better it'll handle. But in real life, they tend to use spacers, and I hate spacers. So I'm just going to set this to 0.01. The sway bars, I always have my front sway bars stiffer than the rear, so that way I don't drift around too much, but I still have good handling, so I'm just going to switch those around. Final drive ratio, kind of play with that. If it doesn't have enough torque, like if you're accelerating too slow, raise your final drive. If you're accelerating nice and quickly, but your top speed is too low, I would lower the final drive. But this is... yeah, I'm gonna go to like a 450, so 4.5. And then we'll go up to the, not the outpost, the settlement, I think it's called. And we will get onto the suspension, because when it comes to Baja, that is what matters the most. Because you can't reach your top speed or turn if your wheels aren't on the ground. And with Baja, you're constantly bouncing and going over bumps and stuff. So I'm going to watch the suspension as we go to settlement and then make some initial tuning and explain to get there. Okay, so this is like rut crawling, another one of those scenarios where having bigger tires helps. I believe Baja vehicles usually have 40s on them. Not quite sure, but yeah. So, typically, again, this is a little bit to driver preference, but a lot based on the vehicle you have. I'll leave a link in the description that shows a diagram on how the bypass shocks work. And out of the box, or just how it already is, this is pretty good. But short compression is like the first little bit of the bypass shock. So like in this range here, mid is in the middle, and then long compression is down near the end. And then the short rebound, again, is at the top, and long rebound is at the bottom. So I'm going to bring this up to 435. Basically, the more oil you let bypass the piston, the softer it'll be. Instead of dampening it, it's just going past it with these tubes. You'd be able to see it better if the fenders weren't on it, but basically the bypass, the bypass things are these tubes. That's what we're adjusting. So, I like my vehicle to be a little bit soft, so like I said, the front I'm going to change, let a little bit more pass at a longer extension, and then my rebound, my short rebound, I'm going to leave like that, and then long rebound I'm going to try dropping down to 20 and see how that does. That way when it's compressed it can move fairly quickly, and then out at the end it's a little slower. And that should be the same here. As it's compressed, it should be in this setup. When it's compressed, it's stiffer. So I think typically, yeah, I think it's typically like this. We'll see how this goes. And then this is already like that. And then your coilovers aren't quite as important, but I don't like the way the fast dampening is higher than the normal dampening. So I'm just going to switch these, as I always do. Change this to 50 and this to 35. Because that just makes more sense to me. There are vehicles in this that are set up like this. I think this was 35. And then 8 and 5. There are vehicles that are normally like like this from the start. I don't know why this isn't, but that should help. I'm going to bring up the differential to 475 and bring my sway bars down by 3 or so. If your sway bars are too soft, you'll have too much body roll and it'll affect your handling. But if they're too stiff, if your right wheel hits a bump, or your left wheel hits a bump, if it's too stiff, it'll force your right wheel to go up as well, which you don't want. So it's a bit of a fine tune. So I'll go and test this out. What we're looking for is the wheels to follow the ground as much as we can, while the body stays as flat as possible. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to allow I'm going to have less rebound damping so that the wheels can drop out more, but the compression seems fine. If your vehicle is bottoming out, you can try making your compression damping a bit more. Like if you're going up a jump or something and you bottom out, try adding a bit more compression, or when you're landing, definitely more compression if it's bottoming out. And then as you're going over a bump, if the wheel isn't following the ground, or if you bounce up too much and off the ground after you land, you'll want more rebound. At the end of the video, I will completely mess up the tuning to show what I mean by that. But I would like a bit less fast rebound damping, and this should allow the wheels to drop down a bit faster. But hopefully you can't hear the neighbor's music. These bumps are a little big to test on, so we'll wait till we get up a bit more. And yeah, it's a bit better for my liking. Once again, it's one of those things that you kind of have to play with and adjust as you go. But this looks pretty good to me. Back up the speed a little bit, see how it does. Looks pretty much perfect to me. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to adjust it as you go. I suggest tuning the bypass shocks more, going off of jumps and stuff. But yeah, you want it nice and smooth but quick so that the wheels can stay on the ground. It's hard for me to explain. But yeah, like I said, I'll put in the description a diagram of how the shocks work. I'll switch to another truck really quick to show this too. But as I said, short compression is when you're first out here, mid is in the middle, and then long compression is down at the bottom. Typically you want softer in the, like, at the furthest, and then harder at the end, so that it kind of gradually slows it down as you land and it's not super rough. And then the opposite for the rebound. Short rebound is the initial when it's coming out, and the long rebound is closer to the end. Again, you want kind of shorter or softer towards the beginning and then stiffer at the end, so that it doesn't come out too far and it comes out smoothly. The dampening you can kind of play with. Like I said, if you're bottoming out too much, you might need stiffer springs and you might need a bit more compression. If you're bouncing up in the air, you'll need more rebound, more rebound damping. But if you're in the air and your wheels come off the ground, you might need less rebound. And then as for the coilovers, the main spring is the big one on the bottom, and the helper spring is the one on the top. It's called a dual rig. Typically the upper spring, I believe, is softer than the bottom one, and I'm not exactly sure why they do it, but it helps, especially under like a higher load and compression. When you land, the bigger spring will take most of the weight, whereas this one allows for the quick, like, little bumps and stuff, I guess, and so on. And yeah, there's better detailed vehicle or videos, but either way, kind of play around with things. Keep the main spring rate higher than your helper spring. The collar height, I believe, changes this. So if you have more collar height, I think it'll make the upper spring longer, and therefore it does more, and so on. Like I said, there's other videos that'll explain that better, but if you kind of keep a good ratio between them, it'll be fine. Playing around with it'll help you understand more. Bump damping, as I mentioned in other videos, is kind of smaller, slow speed bumps, and then fast bump damping is bigger and higher speed bumps so that the wheels can move over them easier, and so on. I'm not really sure how else to explain it. Another thing that you just kind of have to play around with. I did change the differential already, so I will quickly save this and then show an example of a bad tuning setup. Okay, so for experimental reasons, I'm going to change this to 20, this one to 35, this one to 20, this one to 30. Basically just reverse everything. I'm going to keep compression and rebound the same for now. 20, 45, 20, and 30. And we'll see how this affects it. This should make it a lot softer under full compression and a lot stiffer at full drop. And it'll likely bottom out a lot more.
almost better like this in a way, but landing on jumps, it's not going to be as good. You're bottoming out more, hitting the bump stops more. So yeah. And then I will change the other ones just to show a really bad tuning setup. So if your fast dampening is way too high, and fast rebound is way too high, and then I'll put the helper spring lower, that higher, and then this one I'll do lower than the helper spring. I'm still learning how these shots work exactly, but I've got enough to tune a vehicle decently. So now, of course, the front end is a lot lower because I made it softer, and see how it should be a lot firmer and on one end and a lot more bouncy on the other end. You can tell that the wheels aren't quite following the road as well as they were. The body's not quite staying as flat as it was, especially on the bottom, a little bit bigger stuff. It just, if you actually try it, you tell. It's one of those things you have to feel to actually tell the difference. But yeah, it's hard for me to explain. Other people have explained this a lot better. You can really see the rear end not dropping out as fast as it can. Dropping as fast as it should. And then we'll see how this handles off a jump, and then I'll go back to the other one and show how it handles off of a jump. So let's go over here to the jump that I like to take, and then I'll show my other Baja truck that I like. You can see how the back is really spending a lot of time in the air now because it's just way too steep. And then landing, it looked like the front hit really hard. I'll do this again because I went off the jump on a bit of it. But the front seems to be bottoming out a lot, and the back is just spending way too much time in the air. The small spring is kind of for like smaller bumps. The long spring is for bigger bumps. And it launched way into the air when we landed. I'll load the normal version of the truck, or the non-messed up one. You can see a couple tunes that use mods. I don't like using mods often, but I do sometimes. And then we'll do this again with the better tuned one. The default tunes are decent, but they got a little bit to go with. A little bit of tuning. So there you can see the wheels are sticking a lot better, and the landing should be a lot smoother. Still bounced a little bit, but not as much. Go again. The back end could probably use a little less rebound, to be honest. At times. There we go. You can see, even though it did bounce, even though it did bounce, it was a lot softer. And now we'll switch to my old pre-runner. This next truck I'm kind of showing just to show, because it only has coilovers, it doesn't have the bypass shocks. Bypass shocks kind of make things weird. They're more for like extreme off-road and stuff.
make it a lot better for jumps and so on. So this truck is the first Baja pre-runner or whatever. I used to call it a trophy truck, but it's more of a pre-runner. But it's the first one I made in this, and it hasn't changed in a long time. So we can see that this is actually done how I don't like to do it, but it handles really well. I'm actually kind of surprised I did it this way, but you can see the rear end is pretty light. Pretty, light, I guess. And then the front has a lot of stiffening because it's independent. And then the front end is actually towed out quite a bit. It's got a little bit of camber. This is another vehicle where it changes with the position. I should return this because, as you can tell, it is a little stiff in the front, and the rear is pretty stiff when you get up to speed too, so I should switch the line and return it. But it's not bad. Even the basic coilovers are pretty good for off-road, so I'll actually kind of do that now. You saw how it was pretty bouncy and stuff, so we will change these numbers around. 105 and 7. Oops, 7,000. And then 38 and 33. This should be much, much better. You can tell the suspension's definitely soaking up the bumps better. I need to adjust it more because it's still... Ooh, yeah. The front end bounced up really high on that one. But you can tell it's a bit better, especially once we get up to speed. The front end is still way too stiff. But the back end is decent. So yeah, that's how you tune for Baja. Again, it just takes a bit of finagling and it's quite finicky. As I said, pay more attention to the bypass shocks, how much oil you let pass at what point, and how much dampening each section has. See, at this part it's not too bad, but yeah. I should have shown it with the Doom Kicker, which I'll switch to really quick. Come on. I'll use the stripped version so you can see what's going on. Another thing you can do is record a replay and then play it back so you can see what's going on and play it in slow motion. So I'll hit record right now, and then I'll record the replay after, just so I can add it to the end and we'll see how everything's moving. And as you can see, the wheels are doing most of the work. The body's fairly level. It really matters, like, where you let the line pass. If you're boggling out too much, add a bit more, or add the long compression, like take some away, sorry, get so that this oil passes. It's just something you kind of gotta play with.
even in real life, they basically do a couple runs, tune it, do a couple runs, tune it. It takes hours. And then if we go a little slower, you can kind of see how the smaller spring is kind of taking up most of the little movements, and then the big spring takes up a big one. So yeah, I hope this helped. I know it's not super descriptive, probably not the most helpful video, but I'll, like I said, include a link to the diagram, and hopefully that helps, but it's something you just kind of have to play with. Kind of use the bypass shock as the main damping and how much dampening and when it is, and then use the coilover for the speed of the dampening, I guess, if that makes sense. That's what I do at least. So yeah, I hope this was helpful at least a little bit, and I hope you enjoyed.